If you've played any other modern MMO, you'll know that Final Fantasy XIV is not necessarily known for its responsiveness. The game has been described as playing in space or playing underwater, and while it's an apt description, it doesn't explicitly explain the problem. The term snapshotting has been widely used as a colloquial term in the Final Fantasy XIV community to describe this phenomenon. I'd like to take some time today to explain why I think snapshotting is the biggest problem facing Final Fantasy XIV. However, this isn't the only name that this phenomenon has gone under in other games. For example, in the classic WoW community, this phenomenon is referred to as spell batching. For the uninitiated, spell batching is the colloquial term used by classic WoW players. It's simply the process that all actions are processed on the server. To save on server resources, spells used by players are batched together within a certain window of time, effectively creating a window of time measured in milliseconds for actions to happen concurrently. Allow me to show a visual example of what I'm talking about here. In Final Fantasy XIV, Zoma is fighting a monster who casts a spell that, for this example, happens to perfectly align with the batching window. Said monster casts an interruptible spell with a 2-second cast window. Zoma's reaction time is a little slow, and he kicks at about 1.75 seconds. If the kick is pressed at 1,749 milliseconds, the kick is batched before the cast finishes and the interrupt is successful. But say you're unlucky and you push the kick at 1,751 milliseconds. The kick is batched with the cast time finishing and the spell is cast regardless. Let's compare this to modern World of Warcraft. In retail WoW, due to the batching window in modern WoW being 10 milliseconds, that means at the latest, an interruptible cast will be cancelled within 0.01 seconds of the button being pressed. That means that unless you're really trying to scam the timer, the kick is going to go off. This is the ideal MMO refresh rate. You may not like it, but this is what peak performance looks like. Granted, 10 milliseconds is a far cry from what it once was back in 2005, a whole whopping 400 milliseconds. Despite clearly being a terrible thing, there's still people out there that defend spell batching. Spell batching defenders believe that a 10 millisecond spell batching window leads to PvP that feels very flowcharty, very predictable. Take, for example, the YouTuber Perplexity, who posted a short video explaining why batching equals a massively increased skill cap. Just to shorten this as much as possible, Perplexity explains that without spell batching, there's no react to outplays, and the game is just bland CD trading based on who stunned who first. Who would have guessed that two players playing the same class at the same level with the same build and the same gear would feel flowcharty? Truthfully, the game is stale because it's existed for 20 years, and it's been mostly solved at this point. There's not a lot of room for creativity or personal expression in your build and your stats, etc., so there's not really gonna be much in the PvP either. Anyway, Perplexity, like many other spell batching defenders, believes that spell batching is going to fix this problem because it adds a layer of complexity to your skills by sometimes, if performed correctly, allowing 2 hits to tick at the same time by using spell batching windows. Obviously, this window isn't random at a high level of play and is something you can absolutely learn to do. So I can understand why someone would come to the conclusion that learning how to play around the spell batching window is increasing the skill gap. You see, using spell batching to fix this problem is like using a band-aid for a problem that requires stitches. The problem is simply that the game does not have enough viable options for it to feel dynamic. Spell batching may add a level of expression and creativity to a high-level duel, but the number one reason why it's a bad solution is because it fucks the rest of the game up severely, so 98% of people realistically should not give a shit if you think this is a good solution or not. Luckily, in the modern internet landscape, spell batching would not be a necessary thing due to the fact that internet speeds have gotten so much better over the years. However, it begs the question, why is this still a problem with Final Fantasy XIV? From really cursory and basic research, I can't find anything outside of people on Reddit saying that Square Enix just has bad server infrastructure and that's why. But if Square Enix has enough money to pay for NFT minting projects, I think they have enough money to pay for good server infrastructure. The snapshotting window in 14 is somewhere around 250 milliseconds, which is actually not as bad as World of Warcraft's initial release snapshotting window, which was about 400 milliseconds. But I'm gonna be honest, if we're really setting the bar at a game released in 2005, I think that we're really setting the bar pretty low here. I realize I'm probably also giving a lot of credence to the year the game came out, but there's plenty of old MMO games that didn't have bad snapshotting windows like classic WoW did and Final Fantasy XIV does. Take, for example, Ragnarok Online, which came out in the far-off and distant year of 2002. Now, I'm not sure what snapshotting actually is in Ragnarok Online, and I'm not even going to bother looking it up, but I know despite the rubber banding and weird latency issues, they still managed to have a higher than average snapshotting rate. Just look at this footage shot in 2009 and tell me that this isn't like a super high refresh rate. Would PvP this compelling be possible without a low snapshot rate? No. How in the world would I be able to spam the potion button if all of these attacks came in at intervals of 1/4 of a second? I would just die from the burst. Now, if you ask Perplexity, he'd probably just say this is a skill issue on my part. I know I've talked a lot about PvP, but this problem doesn't just affect PvP either. It affects the PvE side as well. I've read lots of complaints about some of the new Endwalker raids and the snapshotting in those, and while I don't want to provide any spoilers because I haven't even done them myself, so I don't really know if that's true or not, but I can use clips from the most recent Fall Guys event that happened in Final Fantasy XIV to just demonstrate my point.
Serious?
I'd like to cap this video off by strawmanning the entire Final Fantasy XIV community by just providing some first-hand examples of excuses that I've heard from the Final Fantasy XIV player base as to why the servers are this bad. The game is over 10 years old. World of Warcraft came out in 2005, and they fixed this issue. This is a problem with the engine itself. There's this really cool concept nowadays called patching that allows developers to update their game after they've been released. Hope that helps. Consoles are the reason why we cannot have a higher tick rate. Here is a list of console games that have an acceptable tick rate. Fortnite, Apex Legends, Rocket League, Tom Clancy's Rainbow Six, Overwatch 2, Street Fighter 6. Literally every game ever made for console except for this one, apparently. Anyway, if you think snapshotting in Final Fantasy XIV is fine, feel free to leave a comment down below and I'll let you know why you're wrong. Otherwise, peace.
There we go. The drinking that flavor. And it, here you go, flavor. You're drinking the juice. You're the flavor. Oh no, flavor.
I've been trying to get this video done for the better part of 2 years or so, and it's been a bit of a struggle, but I am very happy to say I finally got it done. Woohoo! If you'd like to follow me on twitch.tv/ZomaSenpai, I will be streaming maybe a little more regularly. Heads up, I'm the most unreliable streamer, though, so if you hit me with a follow and I don't stream, that's about par for the course, so, yeah. Look, guys, streaming is the hardest job in the world, okay? Let's just be real.